Welcome to the Profits Podcast, the show that gets into the nitty-gritty of running a profitable e-commerce business. On the podcast, you'll get real stories, real learnings from real business owners and entrepreneurs. From financial planning to operations, sales and marketing, learn what it takes to run a profitable e-commerce business today. So, we're ready to start making some serious profits. Okay, everyone. Welcome again to another episode of the Profits Podcast. We're very excited, Michael, to have you on board for this podcast. If you give us maybe a little background on yourself, just so everyone gets an idea what you're up to.
Sure. So I'm Michael Epstein, co-founder and co-CEO of Postpilot. We're a direct mail platform that plugs into Shopify and your e-com tech stack to make sending direct mail as easy as email and Meta. Background, I've been on the operating side, on the brand side for 25 years. So started a company way back in 2000, sold it in 2013 to private equity, got into private equity work where I met my partner and co-founder, Drew. We were operating partners for a number of private equity funds, typically running 8 and 9 figure portfolio companies that were mostly turnarounds. So typical profile was 100 million plus in revenue, but losing 8 figures. And we would acquire those companies, get them profitable again, and then get them sold. Yeah. And one of the tools in our tool belt was direct mail, because you had these big brands. They might have millions of people on their list, but when you dug into it, only a tiny fraction of them were actually still engaging with their email campaigns. Yeah. They either unsubscribed, never subscribed, or were no longer engaging. So where were some quick wins with some of these brands? Well, hit them with direct mail, try and reactivate them. But it was just this clunky, stereotypical experience of finding a printer and a bunch of spreadsheets going back and forth. And we said somebody needs to build Klaviyo for direct mail, because we were always so philosophically aligned with Klaviyo and lifecycle marketing and that whole philosophy. And somebody needs to build Klaviyo for direct mail. And so here we are.
I absolutely love so many parts of what you said in the business. So if you think about the year you started, 2018, and we started as a consumer business, so I spent a lot of money in marketing. 2018 was still the good days of marketing, right? And where you had great ROAS, great return on investments, attribution was working. Let's call it before I was 14. Things were crushing. Yeah. But I love how where most people spend time on, let's argue, the easy side of marketing, you actually found an opportunity, and let's call it the messier side of marketing. But totally. Often that's where the money's at. The money is in the mess. The money is in where things that don't scale. And I think that is actually really unique. So you found, you had digital marketing competing with your idea of letter mail. Yep. What was that moment, 1 second? We should be doing this for everyone. How did that click? It's such a not obvious move, I feel like.
Totally. I love the question. It's definitely a contrarian view, particularly at the time. Yeah. And I can't tell you the number of confused looks we got for years.
Yeah,
everything's moving to digital. What are you thinking? And I think the thesis was, even at that time, over time, it was becoming more crowded and more competitive.
Yep.
And so it was inevitable that more people were moving into digital marketing, Facebook, email, more Shopify came along, tons more brands are starting up, and they're all starting to compete within these channels. So the thesis was taking a longer term view of how things might progress over time. It was, the mailbox is a thing that is getting less crowded over time and less expensive on a relative basis, because the price of postage is mostly fixed, whereas digital is going to become more and more expensive and competitive over time. So, I like to say that we did have this sort of longer term thesis, but I will also say that it definitely took years, and iOS 14 was really the catalyst that got people to really start paying attention, because they still looked at it very skeptically and were like, I can still feed Facebook more dollars and get more dollars back. But iOS 14 was a pretty pivotal moment where it finally made people stop and start really paying attention and go, oh my gosh, I built my entire business on the back of one channel and now that channel is turning into a mess for me. I need to figure out how to build a more resilient and diversified business, and that gave us a definite tailwind.
I love that so much. And I think this actually, I've talked about this already a few times in the podcast, but people, the initial idea of like e-commerce DDC is selling digitally. I'm like, no, selling digitally is a distribution channel. That's how you sell one way. You could sell it. You could sell through retail. You could sell through mail, and really DDC is what we thought DDC was digital marketing. Was just that was the cheapest avenue of marketing. All of a sudden, it got more expensive, which everything like that will as the crowds go. Then you got to figure out other places. You have, Casper, and you have Warby Parker getting retail stores. Now, retail stores is really going backwards. But I love the letter mail aspect, and I would say even I know iOS 14 must have been massive for you guys in the market to realize 1 second we got to have more outside of that. But you mentioned Klaviyo. Honestly, it seems like what I'm hearing is that Google is just getting stricter and stricter, and other mail providers, that all this email that's going in, unless you're so good at creating like content driven versus marketing driven, which is very unique, it almost always goes to the promotional box, which is it. Where do you see actually email? Where do you see the future of email? Forget about digital marketing; that's its own bucket. How do you see email? What's the future of email?
Yeah, I think you called it. I mean, we're starting to see it now. Google is getting much more strict about what gets into your inbox. And that makes sense, right? Like everybody's email inbox is overloaded. Think about when you log into your email in the morning and you click a bunch of things and then you hit delete before you ever open them. If they're in your inbox, and you kind of ignore what's in the promo tab. And it makes sense. Like Gmail's trying to think of the user experience and trying to filter what it thinks is important, and your promotional messages are probably less likely to be considered important enough to make it there. And so, I mean, I think again, these are tailwinds that we generally see with direct mail. It's an attention economy. You're trying to get that message in front of the maximum number of folks that are either prospects or existing customers who aren't getting it through email. And if you build a Klaviyo segment today, you say, how many people have bought from me at least one time over all time? Look at the number. Then build another segment that says how many people have bought from me at least one time and opened or clicked an email in the last 30 days. It's probably going to be somewhere around 10% of that audience. So you're just leaving like 90% of your richest target audience, your existing customers, never actually getting your message. And it's just it's pretty simple to do the math. You can get in front of those folks, and there's a lot of incremental easy wins for a lot of brands.
All right, so I'm going to follow up with like a bit of a long question because it has pieces to it.
Sure.
So I would assume, and I'm saying this as I used to be a brand owner that spent fortunes of money on marketing, never touched letter mail. Well, I looked into it, and I was close to when I was back in 2021, 2022. I guess when iOS 14 happened, like, right, maybe letter mail. But I do think, like most people, I still think haven't tried this out yet. And I guess what some people might be thinking is like, there's so many ways to approach this. And I'll give some examples. I mean, you could go mass mail for top of funnel, hopefully direct response. Or what you're saying is like, oh, no, you could do a retention play. Or there could be a middle play, which is if you layer data on top of direct mail. And I'll just give you like a random example. My brother-in-law is actually California, and he's in the roofing business, and he does letter mail with data. So he buys data from one place, layers in on top of letter mail, and all of a sudden letter mail is like crazy. It's like Facebook. So I'm curious, if someone wants to get into letter mail, how do you what is the typical way you advise them? Do you start with retention? Do you go mass? Do you do mass with data? Give us like a bit of a macro and strategy. That'd be awesome.
Sure, great question. So for brands that are new to the channel, we do typically recommend starting lower in the funnel and working your way up. They're quick, easy wins that you can get on more of the retention retargeting side. They're going to generate incremental revenue, incremental profit, and get you just more comfortable with the channel generally and seeing your customers respond to it. So get those quick wins and then work your way up the funnel, because So, as I'm sure you know, as you move more and more into colder audiences, the ROI is not going to be as high, but it's more a question of getting those big wins lower in the funnel, working up to it. So think retention and retargeting first. Retention is like existing customers that have gone a long time and not come back and not responded to your email. Retargeting, we offer tools called Mail Match and Site Match. Mail Match is we can match an email address of someone that's opted into your list but never bought from you, so you don't have their address, and match that to a postal address and retarget them with a card. So
How
that's
accurate is that, out of curiosity?
it's highly accurate. We can match about 70%, but with a very high degree of
So
confidence.
what does match is accurate is pretty
Exactly.
accurate.
We
Okay.
care mostly about the accuracy rate
Yep.
more than the match rate. We
Yep.
don't want to waste money sending to people that we're not
Yep.
confident in.
Yep.
And so that's a great way to test into acquisition because it's warmer people who have at least engaged with your brand.
Yep.
If you go a step up, Site Match is dropping a pixel on your site and identifying anonymous browsers to your website based on
Yeah.
how long they're spending on the site, what pages they're viewing, things like that. Retargeting them with a card. So
How do you do that?
we have identity resolution tech that will help us identify about 30 to 40% of those folks that
That
are
is
engaged with the site.
wild. That is
Yeah,
wild.
it's a great way to ease into these acquisition campaigns because
Yep.
they're at least a little warmer than cold
Yep.
prospects. But then once you've gotten comfortable there, we could do exactly what you're describing, which is data-driven prospecting. We have astronomical amounts of data, thousands of attributes across hundreds of millions of consumers in the US. And we have AI that we've purpose-built internally that will do lookalike models, think Meta for direct mail. So
Wild.
same sort of approach of looking at thousands of attributes of your best customers and then finding other people that are going to look like that and have high propensity to be a customer. And then we can do lookalike model targeting just like you sort of do with Facebook today.
Yep.
We would not recommend doing like the batch and blast of the old days of
Right.
just everybody in a zip code or everybody that's
Come
like
to Walmart.
yeah, or all females between 30 and 45 that live in this
That
area.
works well for CPMs on Facebook, but I don't know how the conversion rate will look on letter mail.
Yeah, not advised.
Got it. Now, out of curiosity, do you just do this in the States, or does your service could do it anywhere in the world?
So we run our own production facilities, and we have facilities in the U.S. We have a facility in the U.K., and we're going to be adding a couple more areas, Canada, Australia.
Oh, I see. You got to do the print and mail within the country. You don't do like U.S. print and mail it to Canada, do you?
Yeah, we don't. We used to, but the postage cost is just so high to do international postage that it rarely makes sense for the brand. You're just paying like 5 times more in postage. Makes the ROI obviously really tough. So we're opening facilities within those areas so that we can get local transit times and local postage rates, and then it's going to be much more practical for brands.
Talk to me about, I guess, for someone that lives in the marketing world, attribution, right?
Sure.
Everyone, Klavi wants credit, Facebook wants credit, you want credit. Yep. How do you guys do attribution in a non-digital format? Or maybe you digitize. How do you guys do it?
Yeah, great question. So we're natively integrated with Shopify. So we know who receives a card, when they get it, and if they go on to make a purchase. And we can attribute that back in real time, knowing that a person in this household got a card, made a purchase X number of days later, and then went on to purchase.
Okay, but if someone's running like Facebook dynamic product ads, how do you decide who gets the credit?
Yeah, so we can run holdouts and incrementality directly in the app. So what we'll do is come up with an audience, and then we'll say we want to hold out 20% of those people in that audience. And everything about those audiences will be identical. They're going to see the same Facebook ads. They're going to get the same emails, the same television commercials, whatever other marketing you're running. The only variable that we are controlling is one group gets a postcard or piece of mail, the other group does not. And then we'll track each of those cohorts and say, okay, of all of the households that got the mail, X percentage of them converted and made a purchase. Of those that didn't receive the piece of mail, X percentage of that group went on to make a purchase. Let's calculate what the incremental lift was from receiving that mail and really be able to show the true impact. And this is something that Honestly, I think most brands don't do enough of across lots of channels. I think you were alluding to it. Well, everyone wants to take the credit, right? And SMS, as an example, is notorious for taking a lot of the credit that would have otherwise been given to email. So, are you really getting that full credit for whatever SMS is showing? Probably not. So, you should do the same sorts of things, I think, across marketing channels for brands that are really focused on incremental revenue. There are other cases, once you reach a certain level of scale, that brands should really be thinking about it more on like an MER basis, media efficiency ratio, really thinking about investing in top of funnel awareness, demand creation, demand generation. There's different ways to think about measuring success that way, but for brands that are really focused on just thinking direct response ROI on an incremental and true impact basis, that's an easy way to get and sort of the gold standard for tracking it.
Got it. How about on the letter mail itself? What do you see as like I know there's barcodes, not
Yep.
barcodes, right? Barcodes. You could do like deep link URLs to track that way, and I guess in that world, what do you see brands that do have that just have the best impact? Is it a piece of paper? Is it a card? Is it an envelope? Is it a large envelope? Like what's our interesting strategies you see that work well?
Yeah, good question. So format wise, uh, we have postcards. We have what we call our catalogs, which are like large trifold pieces that are like mini catalogs. We'll call them. Then you have full catalogs,
Yep.
and typically we recommend brands start with. On retention, you really just need a postcard. It's really just a nudge or a reminder for a customer who's familiar with your brand to take the action that they haven't
With a
taken.
coupon code or even without a coupon code?
Oh yeah. So we typically recommend some sort of incentive that mirrors the types of incentives you're running through other
Got it.
channels, or something that creates a sense of urgency or a stronger call to action. We don't recommend blasting massive discounts just because it's direct mail versus something else. It's more like, look, if that customer hasn't come back in 6 months and you've been blasting them with email 10 times and they haven't taken an action, let's ensure that we're sort of incentivizing them at that point to take some sort of action and get them to
Yep.
reactivate. Just to go back to your initial question, we do see coupon codes and QR scans to be relatively low use relative to
Interesting.
the actual impact of the campaign. We have a ton of
Got
data on this. We
got
actually
it.
see about coupon codes about 10 to 30% represent about 10 to 30% of the true impact of a
Interesting.
campaign because a customer either forgets, doesn't care, or finds a different code online. The card was sitting on their table for a while. They just remembered. They go to a site, they order, they don't use
Yeah.
or see the
It's like
code.
if you see ad on Facebook, we go to Google to search the brand
Yeah,
to make it good. There's no attribution, but they saw it there. You'll see the lift.
exactly. So incremental, holdouts are a better way to isolate the true impact of the campaign versus saying I'm going to rely on coupon code attribution because we know coupon codes are just going to be significantly understated.
Yeah.
Uh, but that's why we show it all to you in a dashboard. You can get comfortable with saying like, okay, I know that we're on an incremental basis. This campaign is delivering this, and then in formats, postcards for retention campaigns. As you move up the funnel into more acquisition campaigns, typically you want larger formats so that you can tell more of the brand story,
Yeah.
educate people about your product, educate people about your brand. So that's why we'll use like either the catalog, and then ultimately once brands reach a certain level of scale, you can start thinking about full catalogs. The difference there is a full catalog takes significantly more longer to produce, more lead time, as well as the minimum quantities, if you're going to run a full catalog to get sort of economies of scale there, are going to be higher.
I mean, a full catalog, does that still go by like postage or that goes actually by like shipping or tracking?
It still goes post,
Really? Okay.
yeah, but it's several weeks of lead time, and you have to run sort of 100,000 plus. Our
Wow.
minimum is actually significantly lower than the industry standard, where
Got it.
typically you're going to be running hundreds of
Is the lead
thousands.
time on the printing of the catalog or is the lead time on getting something this large out through mail?
On the printing, it's just a
Okay.
different process that
Yeah.
it has to go to when you're doing large one-off sends. You have to sort
Yeah.
of tee it up, schedule it, without going super weeds. Catalogs just have longer lead time and
Yeah.
minimums than other pieces. With a postcard, you could send one card and it goes out in real time. Like there's no minimum, there's no lead time. Some customer or prospect meets the criteria that you've set in your segmentation, and literally, uh, Izzy, you buy a 60-day supply of supplements. We want to say if you don't come back on your own by day 63, trigger a card on day 63 that says, Izzy, it's time for a refill. Come on back. We'll take 10% off. That'll happen.
You know what? Just perfect to my next question. How personalized could it get? Could it get like dynamic as Clavio has like, name, what you purchase, like how personalized you guys get?
Yeah, so dynamic personalization of copy, like we can say, hey, Izzy, it's time to come back and restock. We can use unique coupon codes, single use coupon codes, so everybody gets a unique code natively integrated with Shopify. You can create as many different creative variants as you want. So you can say people who bought these particular products get this creative, somebody who did something else gets these creatives. And then we'll be rolling out the ability to dynamically insert creative. So something like,
Oh, really?
yeah,
Dynamically insert creative. That's wild. Okay.
yeah. So think about it like your abandoned cart flow in
Yeah.
email, which automatically pulls in a picture of
Of
the
the
product
product.
that they left in the cart.
So good. Do you have an example? Don't have to name any names, but like a brand that has used you and their impact to the business. Hopefully, the bottom line of the business, which is what we're trying to focus, at least for our listeners.
Oh, sure. I think we got like, I don't know, 30 case studies now on the website.
Nice.
But uh, a couple that come to mind, Hexclad, you know, tested with retention campaigns and saw a big lift, particularly over Black Friday when they wanted to just hit a bunch of these people who had not engaged. They had a killer Black Friday offer. They want to make sure they're getting that offer in front of a bunch of people. They did a small test, saw a lot of success, and then just continued to gradually build that program out over time to focus more on acquisition type campaigns, expand the audiences that they were targeting. And then, we're getting to like 7 figures of revenue through these campaigns. And, we see it consistently. I could rattle off a million other examples like that of brands that are just engaging with customers that have gone in sometimes years without engaging or coming back, and suddenly they're seeing a bunch of those people come back, reactivate their subscriptions if it's a CPG with subscribe and save, which is super
Mm,
valuable, and then start to move into acquisition. We did one with Caden Lane, which is a baby clothing
mm.
brand, and we could target expectant mothers in their third trimester. We
Wow.
have that level of data granularity, and
Crazy.
so they got like I think about a 4x ROAS on pure cold acquisition.
Love
It's
that.
just super targeted.
Love it. Okay. Before we wrap up, one question I like to ask everyone: if you go back in time to your first business, I know you started one business with private equity. Any one piece of advice you'd give to someone as they start and grow their business? Give
Yeah,
yourself. Yeah, go ahead.
learning to delegate and hire better
Mm,
earlier on was something that came to me over the course of my career. Like I definitely started off when I started my first company, pre Shopify, pre Facebook, pre everything. But just hiring like cheap people to try and do stuff and not training them particularly well and not setting them up for success. And I really learned how to become a better leader, a better manager of people over the course of my career. And what an impact that makes to your
yeah.
ability to grow the business. I think back, like, how much did I leave on the table with my first business because I didn't I didn't build. I mean, we got up to a decent size, but I think it could have been so much bigger had we brought in better people, set them up more for success, thought more about how to delegate and bring in better managers and leaders within key areas of the business. That's something I think about as definitely a learning that took a while to really build up to where we are today, which is a much different place.
I love that. I find the best pieces of advice and honestly the best businesses come from like learned the hard way. Like you learned the hard way. Great piece of advice. I would say I had the same learnings. The businesses like, oh, this was hurting us and it brought a solution. Great for other people probably. Absolutely love that. Michael, thanks so much for being on the podcast. If people want to learn more about you, about the company, where could they find you? How could they engage?
Sure. Postpilot.com, Michael at postpilot.com. If you want to email me, you can find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Michael Epstein. Those are typically the best ways to find me. Happy to chat.
Amazing. Michael, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks, Izzy.
Second. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Profits Podcast. To find out more about our guests, be sure to check the links in the show notes. Looking forward to the next one.